regarding serving God, you would clearly say that if you just woke up one morning and you saw that in God's house, you have these kelim, these utensils, these vessels, it would certainly create a great danger to the Jewish people in their faith. People would say, what? You have a table in God's house? You have a candelabra in God's house? You have a cupboard and aron in God's house? What's going on? Let me just serve God with my study of Torah, with my tefillah. Isn't God's honor malei olam? Isn't it? Isn't God everywhere and His glory is everywhere? How can you reduce godliness inside a house, and even more through these kelim of the aron, the shulchan, the menorah, the mizbeach? Let me ask you something. You're a light engineer, aren't you? Does God need any light help? He doesn't. Does God have a lack of bread for Himself? What do we need the shulchan lechem hapanim for? Okay, what do you need meat on top of the mizbeach? Gentlemen, all of these things, had they not been given to us by God Himself, you might have thought that this golden ark in a place of God's house is like idolatry. Is it idolatry?
No.
Gold? A golden ark? What separates idolatry from all these things? You would have said, I don't want this stuff. Yet God commanded us. So why is it not considered idolatry? A golden ark, a golden candelabra, a wooden table coated with gold? Why does God want these things? There must be a lot of secrets behind these matters.
Reminder to the people that you have to honor Hashem. Gold is the best way to honor something. It's the most expensive, or relatively it's expensive, right? It's a good way to honor something, especially Hashem.
So before you get to details,
when it happens right after the golden calf, He wants to remind them that He's forgiven them.
Okay, so let's first say that had it not been for God's commandment, you would say, what's the difference between the church and the images there and these matters of gold and other things inside our holiest house in the world? Therefore, what we have to understand, first and foremost, it's a godly commandment. And if it's a godly commandment and we don't understand a lot of things, then there are a lot of secrets here behind the matters. But beyond our ability that we don't know a lot of the secrets, the fact that God gave it to us, then we can see what our commentators say. We can see what our sages say. And therefore, the model called the Mishkan, the model of God's house, we can possibly say, it's brought in a lot of the great commentaries, my father-in-law brings the Rabbi Horowitz, we have here a miniature model of our world that you and I are living in. The Jewish people are living in a world which has human limits, which has height, length, and width, and depth, and material matters of gold and silver and copper. So maybe we can say, and maybe that's the point that you wanted to say, Shua, that God is not disconnected from our world. That's number one. God's presence is here, existing. He's involved, and He's having us to be involved with Him. Therefore, your daily matters, your mundane matters, you're an economist, you're a farmer, okay? You might say, well, my daily matters, I'm a grocery store owner. Maybe I am disconnected from holiness. Look at this. What did you put number 2? The shulchan. What's on the shulchan we're learning in the portion of the week?
Showbread.
The showbread. Certainly that will represent the economic existence of man. All your livelihood is around your economic life. So maybe this part of life also has Kedusha. Why? God commanded to produce a shulchan, a table, with showbread in it for the entire week. And do you know which part of the Mishkan it's going to be inside?
The outside, the courtyard.
The Kodesh. Do you hear that? Not outside. It's going to be in the Kodesh. That's the novelty. Your economic viability in life is stemming from holiness. You're making a living. You're a plumber, an electrician. You're a nurse. you're a doctor, you're a sewage cleaner, whatever you are, do you know where your livelihood stems from? The Shulchan inside the Kodesh of the Mishkan. As we're going to learn later, the Shulchan is going to be on which side of the Kodesh, the north or the south? It'll be in the north. If you want to look for wealth in the land of Israel, go to the north. That's where the most viable lands are for tilling land and bringing livelihood home. What's opposite the northern Shulchan in the Kodesh? What's going to be in the south? What's going to be in the south? No guessing. Only if you know. The Menorah. In other words, on the opposite side of your economic viability lies the Menorah, the candelabra. Here, Yaakov said God doesn't need light. It's not for him. It's for us to remind us that our culture, our spirituality comes from the light of the light of Torah comes from the Menorah. The Menorah will be used to be lit every evening with enough fuel from the night until the morning. That will be signifying the culture, the Torah of the Jewish people, okay? Which of course stems from holiness. And only through holiness. But however, what's beyond the holy? By the way, let's go to the Mizbeach. Which Mizbeach will be in this holy area that you put up on the board? Some of you know we have 2 altars, but only one is mentioned in this parsha. Here we're talking about which Mizbeach, which altar? Ketoret. Ketoret. Ketoret in English? Incense. What is the Ketoret Mizbeach altar representing? Only the Kuhuna, royalty, not the king. The elite unit of the Jewish people, the Kuhuna. Who can only bring the incense offering into the Kodesh? Only a Kohen. You and I, a Levi or Yisrael, cannot volunteer nor enter the Kodesh to do the Ketoret offering. And therefore, Kuhuna is the priesthood. And therefore, inside the Kodesh, in the south, the Menorah, the lights of the Jewish people, the Torah, the wisdom. Opposite it are livelihood, the Shulchan. When there's a bracha from God, when we have a Mishkan or a Beit HaMikdash, and these kelim are in existence, so the fact that you're getting parnasa as a plumber, that's because the Shulchan is in existence. And God brings affluence from upstairs, downstairs, through the Shulchan. Whereas there's an elite unit, the Ketoret offering on the Mizbeach. And therefore, there are special units for the Jewish people. And this commando unit of God, called the Kuhuna, the priesthood, that they are our men working on the mountain, and they don't have special properties in order to what? To produce investment and income. Their food is God's food. They're going to get reserve duty every few weeks to work in the temple. 24 groups. Every 24 weeks, they're called up to serve an entire week, the Kohanim, like the Leviim. Gentlemen, after discussing briefly the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, the Mizbeach, we want to relate to the Zer. As it says in our Psukim, okay, Zer, what's around the Aron? Zer, Zahav, Saviv. Okay, we see it in the Aron, in verse. Where do you see the Zer Zahav, gentlemen?
What's that?
Where do we see the commandment for the Zer?
I believe the first one's on the Mishkan. You shall make a table, and you shall cover it with pure gold, and you shall make for it gold crown all.
So let's see and understand.
Right.
Right. Only by the Shulchan do we see it, that there's a Zer Zahav, a golden crown surrounding it. However, the Aron also has a Zer Zahav. Did you see it? And the Mizbeach HaKtoret has a Zer Zahav. Does anyone identify where the Zer, the crown of gold, is?
Yeah.
It's Yud Bet.
Yud Bet.
Yud Aleph.
Yud Aleph. V'tzipito tozav tor, and then you're going to make on it zer zav saviv. So on the Aron, we have the crown surrounding the ark. On the Shulchan, we just saw the second command. We see it too, the zer zahav. And the third one later we see is the Mizbeach HaKetoret. And we ask ourselves, summary, 3 vessels, Aron, Shulchan, and Mizbeach, are the ones that have a zer around it. Okay? We can just see the Shulchan, I showed it to you. Where is the Mizbeach HaKetoret? So you can see the zer, the crowning here. You can show it around. So too is the pure in the Shulchan and the Mizbeach HaKetoret. If we ask ourselves, what message can the Jewish people be getting right now as far as a zer zahav? And that's what I wanted to talk about. You asked about Keter. Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he says in the famous Mishkan on the ethics of a fathers in chapter 4, he says there are 3 crowns for the Jewish people. Have you heard of this before? Shlosha ketarim. Keter, ketarim. The first one, he says, is Keter Torah, the crown of Torah. The second crown, Rashbi says, is called Keter Kuhuna, the crown of the priesthood. And the third one is called Keter Malchut, the crown of the kingdom of the Jewish people. But he says there's a fourth one that's above all of them, and that's called Keter Shem Tov. If you have a good name, you're a reliable person, people like you, you're involved in your congregation, in society, then people like you, you have a good name, that good name stays with you everywhere you go. The 3 vessels of the Mishkan are adorned, are decorated with these crowns. The Aron, the Mizbeach of the incense, and the Shulchan. The Aron obviously represents the crown of Torah. We engage in our lives. We manage our lives according to what Torah says. What Talmidei Chachamim explain us the Torah. Whereas the Mizbeach HaKetoret, the altar of the incense, is representing the Kuhuna, the priesthood, right? Moshe Rabbeinu's blessing to the tribe of Levi before he dies, quote, Yasimu ketorah bi'apecha. You shall place the incense to your nostrils that you can smell it. Whereas the table is certainly hinting to royalty. Have you heard of the table? Wow. You put on some spread, Mr. Wiedemann. Thank you so much. We call that table Shulchan Melachim, a table of kings. So what we see here is a very interesting picture of royalty. We have 3 crowns here. Keter Torah in the Aron, that's the zer, that is the crown. We have Keter Kuhuna around the altar, the incense offering altar, and we have Keter Malchut, the zer, the crown around the Shulchan. But there's one thing above it, and that's Shem Tov. Keter Shem Tov. Keter Shem Tov may be, in an analogy in our parsha, could be the Shechina. What is the nickname of the Shechina? You called him Hashem, the name. Who has a good name? God has a great name. He's called Hashem. God may be in that famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, the 3 crowns. And what's the crown above everyone? Keter Shem Tov. Can you repeat that term? Keter Shem Tov is above all of them, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot. Maybe that represents God's presence in our Mishkan, God's presence in our Beit HaMikdash. Do you know what it states regarding the building of the Beit HaMikdash in the book of Devarim, chapter 12? Listen to this, please. Do you know that Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Chumash? Rather, the name Hamakom is mentioned. The place, Hamakom. What place? Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem, the place that God will choose. To do what? Listen to this. Lishakein shemo sham. To dwell his name there. That's God's presence. Now, you asked about transporting matters. What are placed at the corners of the Aron? According to the Parsha, what do we read?
4 rings.
Rings. In Hebrew, tabaot. What will be inserted inside those rings, please? Poles made out of acacia wood, but plated with what? With gold. Is that right?
Yeah. The
Yes.
poles are plated with gold?
Yes, look in verse 13. The poles are plated with gold. But what's unusual here, do you find a prohibition regarding the poles that are plated with gold regarding the ark? We don't find this in others. What is it?
They may not be removed.
They may not be removed. Regarding the poles of the Shulchan, there's no prohibition they can't be removed. Regarding the poles of the Mizbach HaKtoret, there's no prohibition they cannot be removed. Why? Why does it say, which verse did you see it in? Verse 15? Betabot ha'aron yu'abadim lo yasuru mimenu. I saw a practical answer, but yet a more deeper answer.
Let's go with the deeper answer first.
Okay. The Aron represents Torah study. Are your wheels ready? Are you ready to learn anywhere and everywhere you go? Are you willing to take your pocket set when you're traveling on the bus so you do some review of Mishnah, Chumash, Halacha? Wherever you go, take the Torah with you. The poles, Rav Shimshon Hirsch explains, should not be removed. Prohibition. To tell you that Torah has to be studied everywhere. The poles in it are representing the upcoming transporting of the Aron. The fact that they're in there, you're ready to travel. You're ready to go. You're ready to go because you know Torah has to be studied anywhere and everywhere. Of course, it's the ideal place to study in the Beit Midrash. But if you're at work, you're traveling, you're on the road, you're vacationing, this and that, you have to take the Torah with you. That, Rav Hirsch explains, the symbolic part of the poles being in there. On another note, a more practical matter, would you please reveal to all of us where is the Aron in which part of the Mishkan?
Yes, east.
Which part is it called? The area that the Aron. It's called the Kodesh HaKodashim. Now, the other matters are in the Kodesh, right? We have the Menorah, the Shulchan, the Mizbech. Who walks in the Kodesh every day?
Kohanim.
Yeah, they're busy what? Dealing with the lighting the Menorah, doing the incense offering, cleaning it off. Yes or no? Get the poles out of there. No one should walk into the poles. But in the Kodesh HaKodashim, is there action going on there every day?
No.
What's going on there every day? Nothing. Nothing.
Don't they have to dust it off?
Nothing. It's above nature. There's no dust there. It's above nature. The Holy of Holies is like the metaphysical. It's representing the godliness of the Torah. Therefore, there's no really messing around in the Holy of Holies. And no one's going to walk into or bump into the what? These badim, these poles. And therefore, there's no mitzvah that they must be they have to be, you can leave them in, you have to leave them there. You don't have to take them out whatsoever. On the contrary, leave them there all the time. Leave them there all the time. Now, let's go to the covering of the Aron. The covering of the Aron is called what, gentlemen? Kaporet. Is it the same letters as parochet?
Yeah.
What is a parochet?
Pharaoh.
Is the
Vilon.
yeah that covered
Do you remember the vilon? The curtain that covers the Aron HaKodesh?
It's called
It's called a parochet, is it not? But what is the cover of the ark called?
Kaporet.
It is called kaporet. Okay? The kaporet, the aron is open. The kaporet is a covering over the aron. It has to be covered. It's the same dimension, length and width, as the aron is. And it's made out of what? What is the kaporet made out of, gentlemen?
Gold.
Pure gold. The Torah is pure. The Torah represents pure gold. This cover is representing pure gold. Also, it's a matter of protection. The kruvim and the kaporet are like protecting the Torah. They're guardians to the Torah. Whatever is so dear needs protection. So do we. We have to protect ourselves from outside forces, spiritual forces, physical forces. So too, the Torah requires protection. Do you know that Chazal were given the power to put fences around the Torah? Do you see the guy sitting next to you? He's likely on Shabbat to walk around his house with his MP3 all day. MP3 all day. According to the Torah, you're allowed to walk with your MP3 around your house all day on Shabbat, all day.
The real question is, why would someone of his age own an MP3 player?
More so, I think I have a Game Boy, realistically.
So therefore, came along Chazal and made the prohibitions of Muktzeh, Midrabanan, so that we protect the Torah. So on this hand, we see that the kaporet has a covering. It's as if protection. It and the kruvim are protecting the Torah that is inside. We have to give God honor. As far as the kruvim is concerned, we said that there are different opinions. According to Rashi, it's the figure of a face of a baby. According to the Kli Yakar, it's the figure of angelic beings. The Rambam says, well, this represents the idea of prophecy, that we get prophecy through Malachim. We learn in Tanakh. We see that God appears to these angels, and the angels deliver the prophecies to the prophets of Israel. Whereas the Nefesh HaChaim, Rav Chaim of Volozhin, the great scholar, he writes based on Chazal that the appearance of the two Krovim is a male and female Zachar and a Keva, following Chazal, to express the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Hashem, for Am Yisrael, and therefore the two. Gentlemen, yesterday we noticed the words of the Ramban that the objective of this Mishkan is not sacrificial. The objective of this Mishkan is to continue the Sinai revelation of God to Israel. There was bombastic, it was great, it was in the open. Now it's going to be hidden. Everyone read with me the ending verse of the section of the Aron in Pasuk Kaf Bet, in verse 22. Verse 22. And the Torah, verse 22 of the building of the Aron, the initial chapter. V'no'adeti lecha sham. God says, I'm going to opportune myself. V'no'adeti lecha sham. Remind me, please. Yeah, you. Remind me, order number 2 of the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Order number 2 of the 6 orders of the Mishnah.
Moed.
Moed. What is Moed? Meeting. We often commonly use the word for festivals. So why is it called Moed? If you're part of a committee, you're part of a va'adah. Why is a committee called a va'adah? Because you're meeting every so often, you and your workers, the labor union, whatever you are. Why is Moed, which is the festivals, called a Moed meeting? Who's meeting who on the Moed? We're going up to Yerushalayim 3 times a year, Aliyah LaRegel, to meet up with Hashem. So too, in the Holy of Holies, Pasuk 22, I'm reading it, V'no'adeti lechasham. I'm going to opportune to meet with you. Who is I?
Hashem.
And who is you? Lecha.
It really means like Moshe.
It's Moshe.
Oh.
I'm going to meet with you, Moshe, Sham, V'dibarti itcha, and I'm going to speak to you mi'ala kaporet, above the covering of the ark. Look at me, Mr. Resnick. 1 second, sir. 1 second, sir. Look at me. What's the name of the curtain in front of the ark of the synagogue?
I don't know.
It's a good answer.
Okay.
Parochet.
Parochet.
What is the name of the cover of the holy ark of the Mishkan? Same word?
Similar. Same shoresh.
Same
Shoresh.
letters. It has the same letters. Parochet, kaporet. One is a vilon, a curtain, and the other is a covering. So God says, I'm going to meet with you. V'dibarti itcha, I'm going to speak with you. Me'ala kaporet. Mi bein shnei akruvim, the voice is going to come in between the two cherubites. Asher al aron edut. And now you can know what to command. Am Yisrael.
But Moshe couldn't
Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, you asked the question. That's similar to the question of Rashi in verse 22. I want to treat this question first.
Where's the kaport for the red marker?
No.
On the shelf. Behind you.
My catcher. Gentlemen, Rashi says, he's asking a good question. Moshe Rabbeinu is not a Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu is or not allowed to go into the Holy of Holies? Only the Kohen Gadol goes there once a year on Yom Kippur. No one enters the Holy of Holies. So how is Moshe getting this voice? So Rashi says, I'm going to speak to you. The second Rashi in verse 22, see that please. V'dibarti itcha me'ala kaporet. Rashi asked the question. In another place it says in Vayikra chapter 1, Vayidaber Hashem elav me'ohel moed. Ze mishkan michutz laparochet. Gentlemen, is there a parochet in the Mishkan? We're going to learn later about it. Yes. There's going to be a partition separating the Kodesh from the Kodesh Kodeshim. And that's going to be called the Parochet, like we have it in our synagogue on the Aron HaKodesh. In Vayikra, it seems that the voice is coming from the Kodesh area and not the Holy of Holies area. So because of this contradiction, there's a third pasuk in Bamidbar chapter 7, and the actual voice, Moshe will go into the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. He will not go further than the Kodesh, and he's going to hear the voice coming from the Kaporet, from the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So yes, Moshe will get prophecy from a voice that comes from the Kodesh HaKodeshim into the Kodesh, and Moshe will be at the entrance to the Kodesh and hear prophecy. This is the ultimate objective of the Mishkan, according to the Ramban, to continue the Sinai revelation, but now inside a more modest area, a Mishkan area. Do you follow? That's the objective of this matter. Now, what is the purpose, though, of the Aron? Do we serve God with the Aron, this holy ark? Is there a service of God? You said the Kohen Gadol only goes in once a year. So what's happening all year round? Nothing. So what's the point? What will be placed inside the Aron? What's going to be placed inside?
The menorah.
Inside the Aron. Look, find the source. That's what you meant. And you just tried to catch me if I was concentrating. I know you. Right? Let's see it. In Pasuk 21. Venatata et hakaport al aron milamala vel aron titen et ha'idut asher eitein elecha. And my question to all of you is, these two tablets, what does it mean that it is a dut? A dut, testimony of what? Testimony of what?
Of the brit between Hashem and Christ.
That's the beginning. The Brit. How is it a testimony of the Brit?
Because the Sefer Torah is in there, and that is...
What's before the Sefer Torah? Sefer Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. But there's something more holy than the Sefer Torah there, and it's called the
broken tablet.
The broken tablets is going to be the real tablets, the second set as well. How is that?
Moshe wrote also. The first set
Okay, very nice. So the original plan was what? That the tablets will be God's engraving. And that's the level, a high level of godliness that would be in the Jewish people. But when we messed up in the sin of the Chet Egel, then only the second set where Moshe is commanded, chapter 34, verse 1, God says to Moshe, Psol lecha, engrave for yourself.
What's that Chet Egel?
Sin of the golden calf. Chet, sin. Egel, calf. My dear friends, the Torah and the tablets are testimony that God spoke to the nation. God gave the 10 commandments. We heard at least the first 2. The rest, according to one understanding the Gemara, we were going berserk. We couldn't take it anymore and tolerate it anymore. But the fact that we have in our holiest home, a house for God, testimony that happened 3,500 years ago. God willing, the temple will be built today, if not today, tomorrow. Traffic jam next week, whatever, but it's going to be built. And we're going to have the tablets back. I don't know if it's in the Vatican. Do you have any protexia there?
Guys, let's go to Rome.
We're gonna send in a special commando unit to go into the Vatican and take out. I'm gonna get all these complaints now on the YouTube. Israel is threatening Rome.
Like in Tehran, like we did in
Right, sure.
Yeah,
So-
revenge for what you did to Judea.
What did you say, Moshe?
My question is, so the Rav said that there's only a few specific reasons why one is allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. Are we allowed to go to the
Absolutely.
Vatican
Absolutely.
to get our stuff back?
Absolutely.
Performing a mitzvah.
It's a mitzvah to build it. It's part of building the temple. Gentlemen,
Probably already black.
it seems right now that the Aron gets a nickname called Eidut, and that's because it's representing the revelation at Sinai. We believe that's the fundamental part of godliness to the Jewish people, the revelation at Sinai. We all witnessed it. And therefore, it is such a solid and important thing that the Aron is called the Aron HaEdut. One more thing, and this will end today's shiur. When we get to the Menorah, there's nothing of wood in it whatsoever. As the Torah says in verse 31, Vasita Menorat Zahav Tahor. Zahav Tahor, pure gold. And my question to you, do we do a mitzvah on the menorah? What mitzvah will we be doing? What commandment will we be fulfilling with the menorah? Later commanded, not here, later. What will we be doing? Using the menorah for what? Don't get mixed up like the children do. Chanukia menorah. It's the candelabra of God that He commanded us to light. May Erev Ad Boker. We're going to use Shemen Zayit Zach, as we're going to be commanded in the book of Bamidbar as well, to use pure olive oil. And we're going to fill in 4 shafts to the right, 4 shafts to the left, 8 kanim, 8 shafts are going to be there. And it's going to be lit by the Kohen at the evening, the beginning of the evening. And the Kohen will have to understand, are we in the wintertime or are we in the summertime? If it's the winter, we have long nights. If we have long nights, we need
A lot of oil.
we need more fuel. If it's the summer nights, then we need less fuel. It has to be thrifty. We don't want to waste the monies of the public. Because who's financing the Tamid offering? Who's financing the incense offering? Who's financing the fuel for the lighting of this candelabra made out of pure gold? We are. We remembered our first learning of yesterday. The word Terumah is mentioned in the beginning of the Parsha how many times? 3 times. 2, that we must be part and parcel of contributions. A third one is based on Nidivut Alev, the generosity of our heart. So the first one is, as Rashi brought at the beginning of the Parsha, he brought Chazal. Just read it from Rashi. Rashi says, the first one is for building the base, the Adanim, the base of the Mishkan. What the Mishkan stands upon has to be a contribution from all of Am Yisrael. And the second one will be a half shekel coin will go to the public financing for all public offerings. So when it comes for the summertime, and we don't need so much fuel, we just can't waste the oil. We have to know how much oil to put in. But the oil that's producing this pure light, the light is the light of the Torah. And therefore, we're not sitting in the University of California at Berkeley or the University of Gothenburg, whatever, Binghamton, or Cambridge, British Columbia. We are not studying a collegiate subject. We are not to bring in the input of Gentile theology, of Gentile academics for the study of Torah. We study the Torah. It has to be pure, only ours. It has to be our Torah. We're not studying an academic subject. We're studying a divine matter. It has to be pure alava, that the light is so clear and so bright to represent the purity of our Torah. We have to be very careful. There are a lot of waves and currents out there in the world that are coming perhaps to influence the Jewish people, to influence our Torah. Our Torah is old. Often mankind ridicules, what are you studying something so old? Don't you like new things? The answer is, what is old is true. What is old is genuine. What is old, going back to God's revelation to the Jewish people, is the real thing. We have to see the dynamics of this old Torah. We have to see the wisdom of God in this great Torah. We have to see how this Torah is uplifting us, bringing us closer to God. When there's more dynamics, there's greater interest. When there's greater interest, there's more enthusiasm. When there's more enthusiasm, we become stronger towers of faith that no currents, no winds of outsiders, of missionaries, or this or that are going to influence whatsoever. B'ezrat Hashem, let's stay strong and learn as much Torah as we can and be ourselves towers of strength and light. Amen. Ken Yiratzon.
Oh, yeah.
Since Rabbi